Books, the birth of the mass media. It was Gutenberg who created movable type for the printing press that allowed us as humans to print something, to make copies of it much easier than handwriting copies. And therefore, more and more people in the world got access to books, and more knowledge spread, and more curiosity, and more libraries, all because of the birth of the mass.
About 10,000 years ago, in Samaria, which is modern-day Saudi Arabia, the book begins its journey as a clay tablet. The Sumerians needed a way to keep record of crops and livestock, so they began making clay tablets to write on, with a simple form of writing that they invented called cuneiform. They used sticks to write on the tablets, and then they would leave them out in the sun to harden. However, there had to be a better way.
Did you break another one?
This better way came around 3500 BC in Egypt. The Egyptians had developed a more complex form of writing with pictures called hieroglyphics. They also invented a type of paper to write on. This first form of paper was made from a tall reed that grew along the Nile River, called a papyrus plant. Papyrus became the major industry for the Egyptians, and they began to export it. With this new business, Greece was their best customer. The Greeks began to make scrolls out of the papyrus. The scrolls were lightweight and easy to carry. Since Greece was the world capital of learning in those days, scrolls made it easier for scholars, teachers, and others to carry important information with them. The Greeks also invented a form of writing. It was an alphabet of 24 symbols called letters. Around 146 BC, the ever-growing Roman Empire conquered Greece. They too helped the book progress. They wrote on thin wooden boards, which they punched holes in and tied together. This wooden book became known as the Codex. In order to write in these new books, they applied wax to the wood, allowed time to let it dry, and then the writer would scratch the letters into the wax. These wooden books were soon replaced by ones that had papyrus pages, thus making them even easier to use and carry. Today, codex is the technical term for any book made up of multiple pages bound together. We can thank the Greeks for this new progress. Next, the use of parchment or stretched animal skin made the book even more like the ones we use today. The skins were bleached and rubbed smooth. There were many advantages to using parchment. It was less likely to tear, ink could be erased if needed, it could be painted, and you could use both sides of it. This form of the codex, with parchment, was the first version of the modern book. In regards to the book, the Chinese were writing on palm leaves that had been flattened. These flattened leaves were then fashioned together like a fan to be read. The Chinese wanted a better, more practical material, though, and they finally found it when in 105 AD the world's first sheets of real paper were invented. With this paper they made books that were written by hand. Eventually, they developed a printmaking method called woodcut, which made illustrating and making multiple impressions on the same page easier. Because of this new paper, the Chinese changed how they made books. They began to glue the pages together and fold them accordion style. During the Middle Ages, bookmaking occurred in small Christian communities called monasteries. Monks began to create handwritten copies or manuscripts of the works that had survived from Greece and Rome. They worked in rooms called scriptoria. Most of their copying was of the Bible and other religious material, and it was a very time-consuming process. Around 1100, monks began making illuminated manuscripts, very beautiful and colorful hand-copied books. However, the demand was growing for books, and the monks' slow process just could not keep up. Others began to make quick but not as attractive manuscripts to try to keep up with the demand for books. But it wasn't until around 1450, with the invention of printing with movable type, that things began to progress for the book. Johann Gutenberg invented the printing press in Mainz, Germany. Many copies of a book could be made now in the same time as one could be hand copied. By 1500, printing presses were in 300 European cities. This made books more available and affordable. For the first time in history, books were plentiful and ordinary people could now have access to books, and this spurred an intense desire for learning. All books printed before 1501 are called incunabula, meaning cradle, signifying the infancy of modern bookmaking. At this time in the book's history, most of them contained a title page, page numbers, table of contents, and index. In the 1800s, the first paperbacks were published. They were called dime paperbacks, and they were very popular. The book industry was booming. Modern books still resemble those books made hundreds of years ago. However, children's books have evolved and now include pop-up books, cloth and plastic books, and books that make noise. The newest type of books are e-books. These books can be read on the internet or downloaded to a special handheld device. Regardless of how they are read, the resiliency of the book has proved unbeatable, bouncing back again and again.
Early books were inscribed by hand and lavishly decorated. Many were valued as works of art. Until approximately the 12th century, all books were produced by monks in monasteries. As discussed earlier, this changed with the invention of movable type that worked with the printing press. In 1455, Gutenberg printed his first book, the Bible. It cost the equivalent of 3 years of wages for the typical laborer. 3 years of wages, think about that. You're working for 3 years to pay for one Bible. Quite a large price compared to our $10 or $20 today for an Amazon delivery. Printed books appeared in England in 1476. By the early 17th century, book publishers had followed the early immigrants to North America. Most book content was religious, and sentimental novels also sold well. As the Revolutionary War approached, many book printers turned out political pamphlets. So before we go to the next page, think about the idea that before you would have to go to church to hear the priests talk about the Bible and teach us about the Bible. Now we all have access to read it ourselves. Quite a different approach to learning religion. In the 1800s, there was an increase in the printing technology and the growth of literacy. Many publishers specialized in professional and educational books, while others addressed their efforts to the general public. Book prices declined, books got cheaper and cheaper. The number of public libraries also tripled between 1825 and 1850. Book reading became a symbol of education and knowledge. The most significant book of the period was probably Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin, published in 1852, which was credited with converting many readers to an anti-slavery position. The Civil War soldiers turned to reading to fill the idle time between campaigns, and demand for paperback books increased. By 1880, about 1/3 of all books published in the country were paperbacks. Many of the best-selling paperbacks were pirate editions of bestsellers in England. By the late 1880s, this problem was so bad that a new copyright law was adopted and spelled the end of this era of paperback popularity. That sounds familiar. We're still fighting technology and pirated files like movies and music. Commercialization of publishing started to happen in the early 1900s, the early 20th century. Literary agents concerned with negotiating the best bottom line for their authors entered the scene. They represented the writers, and they worked as a go-between between the writers and the publishers to get the writers the best prices for their work. Modern promotion and distribution techniques were introduced. The book industry was forced to depend more on banks for finance capital, so they were getting loans. And by World War II, all these factors combined to make the book industry more commercially oriented. So more big businesses, less mom and pop shops. Some of the popular books in the early 20th century included outdoor adventure books by Jack London and Zane Grey, light fiction such as The Sheik, detective fiction like Perry Mason stories. 1936, 2 books broke the 2 million mark in sales. Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, and after World War II, new paperbacks for only 25 cents were popular. Racks were filled with paperbacks at train stations, newsstands, drugstores, and tobacco shops. And in 1950, there was an expansion of leisure time and more disposable income, which made book reading a popular means of recreation. Leisure time means you're spending less time doing the laundry, you're spending less time cleaning the floors, you're spending less time working, and you have more time, more free time to do as you choose. And they chose to read paper. Consolidation began in the 1970s and publishers merged with each other continuously. The 1990s and early 2000s ushered in major changes in the way books are marketed and sold. Amazon.com was the first company to offer books for sale online direct to consumers. Did you all know that Amazon started off just selling books? In 2009, book publishing was dominated by only a few big companies. In 2010, online sellers sold more than $4 billion worth of books. $4 billion worth of books online. Traditional brick and mortar bookstores were having trouble making a profit as more people ordered books online or ebooks. Book retailer Borders declared bankruptcy in 2011. I used to go to that one in Woodland Hills. It was a lovely store. Now it's a DSW shoe store. E-readers such as Amazon's Kindle, Barnes & Noble's Nook, and Apple's iPad were becoming increasingly popular. Revenue from ebooks has increased over the past few years, while revenue from traditional print books has declined. Content of contemporary books is remarkably varied and specialized. Vampires, witches, romance, mysteries, political nonfiction, diet, self-help, mass comm, television, film, books. Early ebook readers were expensive, difficult to use, and had poor image quality. Some people couldn't read it outdoors. You had to be indoors to read your Kindle. The situation changed in 2006 when Sony introduced its ebook reader with better graphics and an online store where customers could purchase ebooks for 20% less than the print version. Amazon's Kindle started slowly, but eventually becoming Amazon's best-selling product ever. Let's say that again. It's Amazon's best-selling product ever. E-reader prices continued to drop with Amazon's Kindle with special offers retailing at $79. I know I bought my child a tablet, an Amazon Fire, that was probably $69, and she could watch Netflix on it. It's quite handy. It's not just an e-reader. Here's an Amazon product that you could have purchased in 2016 for $79.99. It is predicted that in this year, 2017, printed book sales will be surpassed by ebook sales. We are in the middle of this revolution in this year. There's also something called printing on demand, and that's when you want to order a book that's very specialized. It's so specialized it's not in print anywhere, but they have a digital file of it at Oxford University Press, and you can order them and ask them to print that book for you, just one copy of that book, just for you, printed to order. Quite an interesting concept. And of course, we all love our mobile books, our ebooks that we could put on any device, our laptop, our tablet, our phones. You can read your books using various apps. You can just get the Kindle app and put it on your iPhone. iBooks app, Google Play Books, Nook. When I was younger, we could get books on cassette tapes and put them in our car and listen to our audiobook as we're driving. It went to CDs, and now we can just listen to the book streaming as we're driving over the internet. And Audible is a fantastic service. It does have a monthly fee, but your first 30 days are free. And it's owned by Amazon. If you want to write your own book and you don't have a literary agent or you can't get it published by a publisher, guess what? You also have the option to self-publish. You can go to a website like Lulu and you can upload your book and they will print it for you. Of course, you have to pay for that service. And then you also have to market your own book and sell your own book. There are options for selling it on their website. But I have a friend who did this. It was a lovely story. He wrote a children's book with his daughter as the main character. He got an illustrator, and he did sell it at school fairs and things like that. So it is possible. Publishers don't seem to be using social media to publish an entire book, but they are certainly using social media to promote and advertise and market their books, such as this particular author's Facebook page, where she invites you to sign up to her newsletter, and she posts information about upcoming publishings and where to find her books. An author's Facebook page or Twitter account can be used to promote a new book, stay in touch with fans, and there are also websites that review books. So social media networking sites like Goodreads will help you learn, kind of like Rotten Tomatoes is for movies, what book you may want to read next. With this particular one getting over 8,000 ratings. So it also gives you a drop-down menu so you can choose where you want to buy the particular book, and even if there are libraries that have that book in stock for a rental. And that's my quick lecture on books. For more details, please go to the textbook and read chapter 4 and take notes. There will be a quiz on it from things from this lecture and from the chapter. And that's it for now. See you next time.